Hi there, and welcome to the 20 Minute Moat, a Verloop.io podcast. Today's episode is part 2 of our conversation with Tejas Vyas, the head of product and design for BigBasket. If you haven't had a chance to listen to the first episode, you can do so from whatever platform you're currently listening on. The episode is called Big Basket, Bridge Leadership, and How to be a CPO for a Unicorn. Tejas Vyas. There's a lot of stuff to cover, so let's jump right in. Like you said, because product is a field that is being more formalized, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, didn't really exist. What you have is more diversity sort of entering the product management space. This is reflected not only by standard metrics of diversity like age, gender, ethnicity, stuff like that, but also more in terms of the kind of people who step into this role. So what we're seeing right now is a lot more people without that technical background, without that coding background, entering the space. Let's just start off very simply. You are obviously a data scientist. Your literal degree was cryptographic algorithms, right? How does your technical background help you be a better PM or a better PL, like you say?
First, let me answer your question you asked on my data scientist. So definitely, I called out some 5 aspects of product management. I think my being, someone who's very objective in my analysis and understanding and coming from an engineering background also, has automatically allowed me to be good at that. So when you ask me how should someone from a non-tech background get into product, in my team itself, well, half of the people are from a non-tech background per se. What is tech at the end of the day? It all boils down to an input getting into a box which has some logic written under it and output. You don't need to know what is Kubernetes, Kafka queues, Java, Vertex, etc. You don't need to understand any of these. My advice to most non-tech folks is there is nothing to be overwhelmed of at the end of the day. It needs to cover use cases. It needs to cover complex variables that could come into fray. Solid understanding of business, of course. It needs a lot of these elements and what you're going to measure, right? Basis how I understand how most organizations are structured. There's a product manager and there's a technical architects who take care of solving some of the detailing from an engineering perspective. As long as a product manager is able to clearly enunciate the problem, you don't need the sharp technical guys to be a product manager. All you need someone who is sharp enough to translate and be very clear on what is the logic behind how the world operates or the product operates.
Now, you obviously have a special insight into this because you are a technical person who does product, but you are at the same time a technical person who does design. In your advice to non-tech PMs or people trying to make it in the space, how do you sort of deal with design on a day-to-day, especially given your lack of experience?
So this is the advice I would give to non-tech PM. So how do I handle design? I don't even have a design background. How do I handle design? So the way I look at design is primarily as an end customer. So there are processes, whether you use Balsamic or use this tool, that tool. But how do I evaluate a design? I take away all my masks. I wear the hat of a customer. And when I see a design, I first try to understand why are we doing this design? There has to be an end outcome. And that is exactly the insight that I would suggest non-tech PMs to look at. Are you solving your problem in the most structured and the crisp manner? Are you asking the right questions? So when I see a design, I'm just asking the right questions. So that's how I'm trying to plug the pieces. I don't need to understand design. At the end of the day, design also, there is a user and the user has to perform an action. This is all about human-computer interaction or human interfaces, right? With such a design, whether if you give me this, does it solve my problem or not? And how easy is it?
Do you have any favorite product leaders and product managers? Obviously, discounting the ones that you work with, but do you have people that you say that person's doing a good job, or people that you look up to in the space?
So I can only talk about one and I follow him, and I think whatever he says, I think aligns with me. It's a sounding board also in some ways of whatever I'm thinking is valid or not. That's Sam Altman. Well, he doesn't know me, of course, but I think he's someone who I'm able to relate to a lot, Anush. I think if you want me to call out someone else from a purely product side, well, I look up to Basecamp. So Jason Fried and whatever he puts down, his philosophy on building products, I think that's fantastic. Basically, completely in alignment with his philosophies, right? Three, I just picked up a book recently just because I was very interested and inquisitive, inspired by Marty again. I think it covered a broad gamut of points on product management and how it should be done. In fact, opened up one or two thoughts that I was not able to glued into my head. And I think he called it out very well. So yeah, maybe these three folks are some of people who I actually consider very smart and probably thinking the right way from my point of view.
If you were to start your product management sort of journey again, what would you do different? And I'll make this question slightly easy for you. What specific hits and misses do you recall when you go through your times here?
So I think a lot of my learning has been over the job where I have made a lot of mistakes in my entire journey, right? And it is all about learning and constantly evolving. I think the one thing that easily stands out, if you have a mentor or someone who you could talk to on an ongoing basis and who could tell you this is how it works, and who's already gone through that phase and is able to give you that piece of advice, maybe I could have done a lot better earlier and I could have reached this earlier. Well, the other side is because I learned all this myself, I imbibed it a lot easily based on my failures and my learnings. But it would be great to have a sounding board. I think that's where I'm coming from. So have a mentor or someone with who you can talk to and you can call a spade, and maybe can tell you maybe this is the right way to do. And even though you disagree, you still understand why this person is coming with that opinion, right? So I think that's one learning. But I learned this, that I need a mentor. It doesn't, being a shy, I was being shy, so it took me a while to get there and have that thought through. Find someone, but yeah.
Gotcha. And as someone who's worked from technical analyst to all the way to head of product, you have a very valuable insight into what metrics you've tracked, right? So you know what metrics you tracked, just say back in the day, you know what metrics you track right now. As the leader of an org, what metrics do you focus? What metrics do you look at on a day-to-day basis, or a week-to-week basis, or a month-to-month basis?
Yeah, non-negotiable metrics, which also has an element of an organizational metric, right? So top among them is, of course, your customer, what your customers think about you. We measure it in terms of the feedback that we receive from our customers. And this is a feedback loop, which I would recommend every product manager to have it in their arsenal. Never lose sight of what your customers are talking about. Always listen to your customer, because even if you build a product and it's taken 2 years and it's working fine, never lose sight of it. That's when maybe someday your product goes bad and it conks off and you never know about it, right? So one of my daily regimens is to keep tracking complaints that come up on, say, the Play Store. We have an internal complaints metric, and where people are genuinely writing what they're feeling, right? We do a bunch of surveys, etc. So that's the numero uno of all metrics. And I think, and even if you work in a B2B company, there's still a customer at the end of the day that you're building a product for. So it's important to keep your ears open to all negative stuff that people are talking about. What is a need and what is a want, right? Separating both of them. That's one. And then these are very specific to your industries. It could be if you're a growth marketing manager and you're looking at, so then probably your metric is a conversion metric. If you are someone who's in charge of bringing cost efficiencies, then your North Star is pretty much the cost of every transaction, for that matter, right? So it all depends, product manager to product manager. I'm the superset of everything. So at my level, so I have to take, some 4-5 key metrics across all my teams and be on top of it, right? And if any of them goes down, where at a product or at a customer level, something has really gone off, then we need to take corrective actions.
Now, I think the theme of this year, or the thing that has dictated the theme of this year more so than anything else, especially for you personally and professionally, is the coronavirus, right? Is COVID-19. Because you are someone who A, had COVID, and B, you are someone who worked in possibly the most impacted company coming out of COVID. Talk to me about what BigBasket went through in the days, weeks, and months after COVID happened, lockdown happened, etc.
So, it's been a crazy year. The world changed sometime in March, and on 23rd and 24th March, we lost 80% of our workforce in BigBasket. I know this is mind-numbing, but if 80% of your workforce, and these are people who do the picking and do the deliveries, suddenly take off for their villages, and that is a point in time when every customer in the world is trying to reach out to BigBasket for their essentials. So in the history of supply chain, probably this would have been the biggest gap in terms of customers wanting produce or wanting essentials, and there is no supply. And it's you can call it a eureka moment for any company who probably gets this kind of a demand and is able to service it. But here we were, where we lost all the workforce. We had 20% of what it should be, and we had 10x the demand. So things had not been easy. I think it took a collective resilience of the entire organization. There is no one person to name or call out. From 23rd March to 24th March, sometime around May, we were almost starting to deliver at similar to pre-COVID levels by figuring out innovative ways, innovative supply chains, figuring out every possible way to deliver essentials to customers, and even then started to grow there. And, I should point out that the intent was not out there to make money out of this. I think sometimes it could get misconstrued that, you have a business opportunity. I think in hindsight, it's always a moral dilemma when I talk about this, because what happened has happened. We did gain a lot out of this from a pure business monetary angle, but it is a very it is a moral dilemma because a lot of people lost lives due to corona, and this is not something I would have wished for as a way for me to make money out of it. And that's where the moral dilemma lies. So that's my overall thought behind this, Anush. We did recover, and in fact we hired a lot more, and we were able to service all our customers. And even until August, when there were so many lockdowns, BigBasket continued to grow. Compared to all its competitors, it stood out as someone who continued to deliver groceries on an ongoing basis. There was challenges, of course, in getting slots. A lot of listeners would attest to that, but we did give everything that we had, more out of trying to service our customers and not being out there to do business. At the end of the day, what mattered is people really needed something. And just to call out why I keep bringing this up is, so we had an independent channel just to take orders from the quarantine, from the sick, from the elderly, and from people who really needed us, right? There's an independent customer service channel that they could approach us and we would deliver it, no questions asked. So this was during that, and we, of course, it was done on the background because we didn't want this to be manipulated or everyone wanting to use such a channel, and it was kept more out of from a word of mouth perspective, right? But we did do that, and we also tried to reach out to a lot of our customers, existing customers, because who felt that they've been with BigBasket for years, but when it mattered, they didn't get the slots, right? So we even did something for them by creating some specific reservations on existing customers versus new customers, right? So we did some level of reservation basis that also, that we don't just get new customers on a platform and have everyone think that maybe we gave up on our loyal customers. So we had to do a lot of these things, Anush.
Sort of parallel to COVID, obviously at the point where you're seeing a massive sort of drop in your workforce but a massive increase in demand, the number one area that takes a hit is probably customer support, right? Two-part question: how does BigBasket usually manage support, especially at scale? Because you have how many customers, if you have to give a ballpark, 300,000 orders a day, right? How do you manage that support at scale and at that volume, and B, especially during COVID, how did that change?
Okay, so we always maintained a fixed notion of the number of agents versus the number of orders that we do, and that's our capacity plan. Now, imagine when you have such a huge supply-demand gap, it shot up. The quantum of complaint, the quantum of support that was needed shot up exponentially. We did one or two smart things here, right? First thing, it also needed our support to be moved home, so that we didn't want the customer service agents to actually come over to work in office, right? So we immediately moved it, from a work from home management, which is probably a first. At that point in time, I don't think there were any systems. We probably did that within 10 days and then achieved it. What that helped us to do is it became easier to get more people who are comfortable doing this join our platform, right? I think secondly, you talked about automation. Now with so much demand, we had a lot of queues coming in and all. So we immediately fine-tuned some of our infra to route appropriately and give out the right messaging, right? That's number two. We had to bring in the right automation at this point in time, more from a backend perspective, to bring in queuing mechanism. So incidentally, before COVID, we never had situation where we would make a customer calling us wait for more than 10 seconds. It was our internal benchmark. So we hadn't built in like a strong infra on our queues. Now, COVID meant we will not be able to support that anymore. You needed like queues and tell people and give out messages that, we will not have have an ETA for you on when the slot would be available. The questions predominantly would be when would be my next slot available. So what we did is we also put out that level of communication on our application so that a customer doesn't have to necessarily even reach out to support because of this proactive communication, where we called out, this is the daily summary, these are the orders we do, we are constantly trying in your area, we serve these many orders, etc. Right? So we didn't, if you call it automation, we still bought in automation by building these product features. Third, our chat feature, just maybe a year or so ago, we bought in this entire chat feature, which moved a lot of voice calls to chat, and chats are way lot easier to support, right? So we're already moved there. That also helped us enable us to scale a lot better and to be able to be proactively tell our customers where we are. And finally, we are at a stage where we are, about to get our first bots, in a sense, talk about, do some of these activities managed by bots, right? Because we see the need that out of 100 requests, maybe 10 to 20 are something which can be easily solved proactively with a bot. Of course, ensuring that the fallback is going to a human agent if the customer is not satisfied. See, what I personally believe as a product strategy also, and more as how humans work, because I hate to be put on IVRs which let me go through some 8 steps, right? And makes me work hard for it, right? Just because the technology from the business wants me to go through it, right? The way I look at it is, you need to give one level of opportunity from an automation perspective to automate it, but immediately move it to an agent, to a human, as I would say, if there is any chance of an ambiguity in what the customer's expectation is and what the customer wanted. So this is more of a philosophy which we have taken internally, even at BigBasket. We firmly believe in not going through an IVR mode at all. We have our first call response should be within 10 seconds so that you can respond to, you are very empathetic to a customer's time. I think that's where we are coming from. And there are two more modes. So anything that is empathetic to a customer's time can also be done through humans and also be automated. So that's where your bots could come in. But you should not get everything so botified, as I would say, to an extent that it becomes a pain to even ask simple questions, right? So at this stage of our evolution, a balance is needed, is what my thought is.
How important is support to product, A? And how do you tie learnings that you get from support back into product, B?
Sure. Your first question, if I have 2 years, then definitely one of them is support. There's no way around that, because that's where, and it's a lot more deterministic. See, the other year, which is your product, just trying to get insights from customers does mean going through a lot of objectivity in terms of data and all. And still there is a ambiguity or vagueness into what a customer is trying to do. If I need a direct answer, I look at my other year, which is the support, where I would get a clear understanding of what a customer is asking. And is the way I've put my question out to support, if I say, hey, is the customer specifically asking for this, as I narrow down my question, at some point, if I hear a yes, this is exactly what the customer is asking, I get my response in a matter of minutes, rather than crunching through tons and tons of gigabytes of data to get some notion of what a customer really wants. So support is literally the other year from a hearing your customer perspective. Secondly, how do I tie in this? Well, all this is important feedback. Your complaints is an important feedback for you. What are your customers demanding? What are their needs? What are their wants? And where are we failing as an organization? Which metrics are not working out well? So you put this in and then frame your problem. Prioritize your problems. Pick out the most important and critical ones and start solving for those. And not all problems are easy. Well, there could be a line item number 3, which is a low hanging fruit. Doesn't need too much effort. Just solve for that and start seeing the uptick in your numbers and conversions. So product and support are inherently tied to each other. The second part of the support that one needs is also the experience that a customer seeks in how they want to, whether they want to self-serve it via the product or they would need an agent to solve for it. Typically, a lot of products are built in getting someone on some kind of a IVR or an agent on the phone and asking for a solution. Now, most products make this mistake of not proactively providing this information to even avoid this kind of a friction. It's a nuisance for any customer. If you give me this information in a much graded manner where I search on Google it or I find this in a page, this is how it exactly works. And it also depends on that communication or the content, right? It should be very crisp. So you get me there, show me all this information. And from here on, if you have any more specific questions, you give an option right there. Ideally from there, some some level of context passing would be very useful, so that even when one makes a call to the support already has a context of what the question is about. So that's the way to look at it. Primary outcome should be, how do you reduce the time spent by the customer on a problem?
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the 20 Minute Moat presented by Verloop.io. We post new episodes, bonus content, and full interviews on our website and social media. Just visit verloop.io/podcast, no more. If you like what you heard, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen from. It means a lot and it helps support the show.